Our next speaker is Dr. Hanifieh Khayeri. She has a PhD in bioengineering from Trinity College Dublin in Ireland, where she reached the interplay between mechanics and biology during tissue healing. She is a human rights activist that travels to the United Nations for the Human Rights Council sessions in Geneva. There, she works to promote human rights, in particular women's rights, in Iran. As her job, she is employed at the Ministry of Research and Higher Education in Sweden, where she is part of a commission of inquiry with the mandate to propose reform for how the Swedish government governs, organizes, and finances research infrastructures. Thank you for joining us today. It's an honor to have you with us. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Dear friends, happy International Women's Day. I want to thank the organizers for inviting me to this wonderful event. It's a big honor to be here among these excellent line of speakers. I'm a human rights activist, as the presenter said, who lives in Sweden, and I've been active in promoting human rights, and in particular women's rights in Iran for many years. But today I've been asked to tell you a bit about my family history and the reasons that I happily want to contribute to the path that has been laid down by Mrs. Maryam Rajavi and the Iranian movement around her. I come from a family of very strong women who have been fighting against dictatorships all over the world, in China, Africa, and Iran, and since before the Second World War, actually. But my closest inspiration is, of course, my own mother. My mother, Sufan Chan, was born in Uganda by Chinese parents. She had 4 siblings and was the quietest of the children, my grandmother says. After dictator Idi Amin came to power in Uganda, my mother's family moved to the United Kingdom, where my mother spent her teenage years and finally went to college. She met my father in college, and my father is from Iran. When my parents met, neither of them were political activists. They were just 2 students whose parents had sent them to study at university. But this was in the mid-1970s, which is a period when there was a lot of political debate at the European universities, but also inside Iran. My parents got to know each other, but they also got to know both at the same time Iranian politics and Iranian activists. It's probably not strange that my father became very passionate about Iranian politics and dreamt of a democratic Iran. I mean, he's an Iranian after all, and it was his homeland. But my mother was equally inspired, if not more. She thought the Iranians were kind-spirited people that deserved their freedoms. She had seen how bravely they had protested in Iran and in the UK. And she had learned from her own mother and grandmother that freedom from tyranny and dictatorship is not bound to country borders. It's for everyone, no matter where they're born or who their parents are. So the day came when she decided to join the Iranian movement and follow the path that was laid down by the People's Mujahideen. She had found her calling. She was inspired by the brave Mujahideen women, and she wanted to be like them and fight alongside them for a free Iran. In many ways, she was a true humanitarian who knew of no national borders and wished that every person could enjoy their basic human rights. My mother was killed by the Iranian regime in 1988 when I was only 4 years old. It hasn't been easy to grow up without my biological mother, but her life choices are the biggest gift that she could give me. I grew up in foster care in Sweden, and I don't know if many of you have been to Sweden, but it's a very comfortable country. Life is easy, and most people here live a privileged life, and so do I. And my mother taught me that privileges and freedoms come with responsibility. If a person is free to choose his or her clothing, education, marry and divorce to whom they want, free to choose his or her religion, and free to political opinion, then this person also has a responsibility to help others who don't enjoy these freedoms, to be a voice of the suppressed and the silenced. In the path of discovering who my mother really was, I discovered Mujahideen and the National Council of Resistance. I am too inspired by them, especially the women. People in this movement are open-hearted and willing to work incredibly hard for the common goal of a free Iran. I also love that everyone simply works to do their very best in this way. To me, it's a privilege to know this movement and work with them. The world that we are living in is unfortunately still full of cruelty, where people in many countries are living under the suppression of dictatorships. To me, the Iranian struggle for democracy stands out as it has such an inspiring and dedicated organized opposition movement. A movement that is based on humanitarian goals, clear goals for gender equality and peace for the region. Also, Iranian women stand out. Women in Iran have fought for democracy for nearly 200 years. There are parts in the Iranian history during the constitutional revolution, for example, where women sacrificed their own rights in order to establish democracy in the country. Iranian women have in the past 100 years been in the forefront of all revolutions. They take a huge responsibility for forwarding their rights and democracy and pay, unfortunately, a very high price. Every generation has its own struggles and fights. For most women listening, you probably know this from your own family history. When your grandmother was allowed to go to school, or when your mother was allowed to pick her career. My family and my mother taught me that we choose our own fights. So I am very glad to see so many people here who have decided to celebrate the struggles and victories of women throughout history today. It's an honor to celebrate with you. Thank you.